Hi, I'm Katie Dolgov, Exhibitions Manager and Registrar here at Oceanside Museum of Art. I'm in our newest exhibition, Southern California Contemporary Quilts, and I had the pleasure to sit down with curator Beth Smith last week to ask her a few questions about the exhibition. I hope you enjoy. Tonight we are talking with the curator of Southern California Contemporary Quilts, Beth Smith, and you can see her face on screen now. Beth has a long history with fabric art and with OMA, and she'll tell you all about herself in a minute, but I wanted to say I got to know her a number of years ago when she was the director of the Visions Art Museum for Contemporary Quilts and Textiles located in Point Loma, San Diego. And I knew of her even before that. Before my time at OMA, she was the head curator at the museum. So, Beth, it is so great to have a chance to chat with you about this amazing exhibition you put together for us. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I'm delighted to be with everyone tonight and also to be back at Oceanside Museum of Art.
Go ahead.
And I'm thrilled to be able to bring this exhibition to the museum. I know that a lot of people that are involved with Oceanside Museum of Art and have followed the exhibitions for a number of years are aware that it started showing contemporary quilts in 2002. And it was a very popular show then, and quilting is still very popular. So I was thrilled.
Yeah, hugely popular. When we don't have a quilts exhibition at OMA, we are regularly asked, when are quilts coming back to OMA? And yeah, we're thrilled to be working with you. It's been nothing but a pleasure to put together this exhibition the whole way. Now, while we get audience oriented with the exhibition, we're gonna play a slideshow of a walkthrough of the gallery, which is fully installed at this point, so viewers can see the whole exhibition. Now Adam's going to get that started here for us. He'll do a screen share. And Beth, how about to start us off, let's just get a feel for the exhibition. Fill in the viewers, what is the story of the exhibition? What was the inspiration for your choices?
Well, the story is that fortunately for me, Oceanside Museum of Art asked me if I would be interested in curating an exhibition on contemporary quilts. Oh boy. Just what I want to do. So I was thrilled at the invitation, and because I had the privilege of being able to invite the artists that we were going to review, you, Katie, me, and Maria, the director of the museum, to see what quilts we felt would be accommodated by the gallery space, and also really represent what's going on in the quilting community in Southern California today. Like most kinds of art, it changes frequently, and quilting and contemporary quilting especially has changed a huge amount since the first show was at Oceanside Museum of Art in 2002. Partly, as you would imagine, is because of digital technology and the fact that we can all communicate with each other all the time, anytime. And for quilt artists who also teach, or exhibit nationally or internationally, all of their work is on the internet, as soon as it happens. So there's a huge amount of resources to draw from. So I was tasked with inviting artists from Southern California only, and that is in part because that's the mission of Oceanside Museum of Art, to recognize artists of the region of Southern California and of North Baja, Mexico. So I had to figure out, well, what's the cutoff? Where is Southern California? How is that separated from Northern California? And so I just looked at a map, and a number of artists that I was familiar with, from curating quilt exhibitions over the years, and I kind of knew where they lived, or if not, you can find anybody online anymore. I just Googled people and came up with a pretty good number of people. And I'll get to that later on when I talk about pockets of the country where quilters sort of congregate because of exhibitions and museums that are known for that area. But there are 35 artists in this exhibition. And you and Maria and I sat down and looked at all of the images. And what we were really hoping to do is is to show some work that either has never been seen before, is different than anybody would have thought a quilt is. So we're really pushing the boundaries with some of the work in this show. And also work that represents lives in Southern California. You know, your experiences of living here, or certain favorite areas of Southern California that you visit often and have decided to turn it into artwork. So that's kind of how the show came about. What I find really interesting about some of the work, especially three-dimensional work, is when people aren't familiar with contemporary quilting and they hear the word quilt, suddenly their mind goes back to, you know, a traditional bed covering. Maybe they grew up with at their grandmother's house, who knows. And those are very well respected traditional quilts that have been made for hundreds of years with patterns that are particular to that era. And contemporary quilting is pretty much something that happened from 1970 until present day, and now includes just about anything that is 2 or more layers stitched together. And that's it. That's a contemporary quilt.
Wow. I actually had never heard that anything includes 2 or more layers stitched together. I love that. Yes, looking at some of the quilts, the quilts in this exhibition, these are not your traditional quilts at all. This is every range of fabric and fiber art, and it's really mind-blowing what can be created with these layers and colors of materials. So now tell us a little more about yourself. Tell us about your experience in the quilt and fabric art world. Like, how did you get into this field?
I started out as a sewer. You know, I took clothing in high school in home ec, and I loved the touch of the fabric, which most quilters do. That's kind of why we do what we do. And then when I was in college, I was working in an undergraduate degree for applied design and focusing on fabric and textiles, fiber and textiles. So that's kind of always been my focus. I kind of grew up with the traditional quilts around me and my family, my grandmother that had some beautiful antique quilts. Well, what we're now considering antique quilts, they might not have been then. So I've really always been drawn to quilting. And when I was first at Oceanside Museum of Art and we had an opportunity to bring the International Jury Quilt Visions to the museum, you know, to me, that was just like being in heaven. It was great. That's been my background.
Oh yeah, I've looked through those catalogs. We still have the catalogs, I think, from every Quilt Visions exhibition that we had presented. And unfortunately, in my time, we only ever did one Quilt Visions, but yeah, every single one was just stunning, and they got more stunning throughout the years. All right, so let's dig into the exhibition. How do you feel a fabric artist's physical location informs their work? Since we're focusing on Southern California, how does that reflect in their work?
It's different for this show, and of course for everybody that is working in art in general, not just in quilts. But there are people that work abstractly. There are people that see things out their window and that sparks their imagination, and then, you know, the wheels start turning and you start thinking, oh, I've got some fabric that is about that color and I could do this with it, or maybe I could dye some fabric. And so oftentimes, you know, just your nearby environment is what will inspire your work. And we've got a few in this show that are very definitely images from Southern California, and the artists were inspired by particular locations.
Yes, Adam, let's bring up the picture of the first quilt.
So, as we can see, this is Kathy Piper's quilt Pacific Interface. Kathy started off with a photo that she took at the La Jolla Shores. For those of you that don't live in Southern California, La Jolla Shores is the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and the tide pools and the rocks and the sand, and there's all the kinds of things that you would think you would see along an ocean shore. And that was Kathy's inspiration with a photo that she had taken. And here's a detail of her work, so you can see her stitching and her layering.
Yeah, I love the kind of the chaos of the stitching on this quilt. This is one of the ones where I feel like it really is drawing with thread. And yeah, especially the painting with the layers of the fabric.
As we go through the slides, people will be able to notice that quilters aren't using just only fabric, and this detail shows a nice bit of cheesecloth that Kathy has added into her work. Another quilt by Nancy Lemke, Seaside One, also inspired by the tide pools along the coast of Pacific Ocean here in San Diego. And this is sections of work. You'll see the background is different sections, but all kinds of movement that's floating across this quilt. And I really love the way the fish are flowing along and the octopus, and there are so many little details in this that when you get close up, you can really enjoy Nancy's ability to manipulate the fabric. Not afraid to cut into it, tear it, burn it. We'll see all of those techniques in this show.
I love the juxtapositions of the different patterns on the fabric. And you know, I didn't ask before, but I wonder if she crocheted this star herself. I feel
I
like
don't know, but maybe she can answer that for us when we get to the Q&A.
Yeah, we'll see if she chimes in the chat if she's here.
And I can't see the title card on my screen. You know, it may actually say whether or not that's a hand crocheted piece of hers.
I can't remember if it did. The title card was only on the first
yeah,
image.
So we'll have to ask Nancy about that. And another very familiar Southern California scene is Nelda McComb's homage to David Hockney, Hockney's Palm Springs. Now, for those of you that have been to Palm Springs, and for those of you that haven't, it's a desert, and it's in a valley surrounded by mountains. It is very, very hot, and you'll see the mountains here in Nelda's imagery, sort of the sunlight bursting up from behind the mountains. You'll see a lot of palm trees, not just in Southern California, of course, but there are certain areas where you'll see a lot, and Palm Springs is one. There are some lovely mid-century modern homes and hotels and buildings there. Most of them have pools because it's hot there. And here you can see the swimmer in the pool that Nelda has captured. Next slide. And an image from the typical modern century architecture that's so prevalent in Palm Springs. Looking through the window.
Yes, the way the drapes kind of layer there with layers of thread instead of...
Yeah, it's a nice frame for that scene.
Right, yeah.
So talking about palm trees, next we have Del Thomas's quilt, Palms, aptly named. And Del has said that when she first came to Southern California, the very first thing that caught her eye and stayed with her were palm trees. And if you grew up someplace that's not Southern California, the first time you're here, you know, it feels like paradise because of the palm trees and the way they've been, you know, shown in movies and on television, always looking so tropical. So there are three in this quilt. Can we see the detail? Del does a lot of fusing, and fusing is where you basically iron an adhesive in between layers of fabric to keep them in place. And then you'll see that she has machine stitched on top of that. Next slide. Now, Del loves birds, and just about every quilt Del owns, whether she's purchased it, she is a collector, major quilt collector, or she's put the quilt together herself. She manages to get a bird in there. And if it's not on the front of the quilt, it would be on the back of the quilt. And so I see this little bird that, quite frankly, when I first saw her quilt, I did not notice it. So thank you very much for this detail.
Yeah, you're welcome. When I saw that bird, I was just like, yeah. I loved it. The brown bird hiding in the brown trunk of the tree.
That's kind of Del's signature.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So next quilt is a beautiful, vibrant quilt, but you'll see these dark, leafless branches. And For those of you that may not have been tuned into the news for the last week or so, we've had extremely warm weather here in Southern California. And with that heat and the dry air, we have, I don't know how many, I think I read something like 300 forest fires that have broken out throughout the state, more toward the center of the state or the north of the state. But you cannot live in California without having been exposed to a fire of some kind or another. And it's very frightening. And even though Kathy's work is so bright and vibrant and energetic, but it is, when you look at the details, you'll see the darkness and the shadows and the kind of thing that we deal with pretty regularly in the summertime and early fall here in Southern California. It's one of those quilts that's very typical of location. You know, while we were talking about quilts that are inspired by location, this is certainly one.
Yeah, that one is, that's really impactful. And the colors really, truly are so vibrant on this quilt. But it is exactly what we go through, these horrible fires, and it's a really impactful part of our environment and our life in Southern California. So I'm glad you did choose this one and another one that reference the fires that are part of our lives.
There are a couple other quilts in the show that also reference fires. So we'll get a chance to look at that when we see the whole show.
All right, so next question. What are some things about local quilting and fabric art community that are unique to Southern California?
As I mentioned, earlier, there are pockets throughout this country and actually throughout the world where you'll find quilters that congregate for whatever reason. Quite often there's a venue, a museum, an art center, an annual festival or something like that, that sort of pulls all of those people, whether it's contemporary quilting, also known as art quilting, depending on, where you first learned the terms. There's now modern quilting, which is a little bit different, more geometric and solid colors if you want to generalize. And then there's traditional quilting, the patterns that I was referring to earlier that we think of as older and often functional. Traditional quilters are generally doing functional work. And because of that, we have Oceanside Museum of Art and Visions Art Museum, Contemporary Quilts and Textiles, just in San Diego County. San Diego County has 20 quilt guilds alone in the county, which is a high number. There's another quilt museum in Northern California. There's, if you follow quilting, and if you don't, I encourage you to go online and just Google something like quilt museums in the US. There are about 80. And it's always surprising when people that aren't familiar with the field realize what a big community it is. The way it started here, in our region, is by a bunch of volunteers that decided that they wanted to put on a quilt show. They were quilters, belonged to a guild, and they approached a venue. In 1985, they founded a nonprofit, and the first quilt show was in the late, I think it was 1989. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly. And it was in Fallbrook, which is the northern part of San Diego County, at a resort area called Grand Tradition. And so the volunteers, all volunteers, just figured they'd put on a long weekend show, kind of for that community that, they've gotten familiar with. And 4,000 people came in a long weekend.
Wow.
And it was an aha moment because it made everybody that was involved realize what an important thing this is, and that people want to see it and they'll come to it. So next, find a bigger venue. And so they did. And the International Juried Quilt Exhibition, it's a biennial known as Quilt Visions, went to a larger venue, which at that time was the San Diego History Museum, now the San Diego History Center in Balboa Park. And I believe there were 82 quilts in 1990, and then through the 90s every other year. And then in 2000, the History Museum decided to do some renovations, and they didn't have space for Quilt Visions. Oh my goodness, what were we going to do? But by then, I was involved in this community and also working at Oceanside Museum of Art. And I said to the director then, our dear Skip Paul, what if we have quilts here? And so we looked at how popular these kinds of exhibitions were for other similar venues in the country, and in 2002 brought Quilt Visions to Oceanside Museum of Art, where it lasted until 2010, when Visions Art Museum Contemporary Quilts and Textiles was renamed, and the exhibition is there now. And in fact, probably, if I recall, will be opening in October, virtually, unfortunately, virtually. So Southern California is deep with this quilting community. It's also home to a couple of annual festivals that draw huge crowds. I mean, when I say huge, I mean thousands. The International Quilt Festival, which everybody knows is in Houston every year. Usually there's 50, 60,000 people that come to Houston, Texas every fall for the International Quilt Festival. And a few years ago, International Quilt Festival came to Southern California in Long Beach at the Long Beach Convention Center. Also, thousands and thousands of people. Unfortunately, it had to be canceled this year, as well as the Houston show, and all of us that look forward to those are really disappointed. And California is another annual quilt festival, exhibition, vendor stalls, anything that has to do with quilting, machines, fabric, notions. I mean, if you sew, if a needle goes through a piece of fabric, then it's going to be at one of these festivals. And there was a survey done by a quilting magazine about 10 years ago to find out how big of a community worldwide it was, and discovered that quilting is then, 10 years ago, a $3.8 billion industry. Most people don't realize that there's all of us out there. But this is, people that buy machines, buy fabric, go to quilt shows, become collectors. It's a huge industry. And we're thrilled to have it at Oceanside Museum of Art.
Oh my gosh, aren't we? Yeah, we definitely are. Yeah, that's some astounding numbers. It is such a sad shame that the Long Beach Convention was canceled this year. We were going to have some partnerships with them. It was going to take place at the same time as our exhibition,
Yes.
but just hopefully we can coincide with them again in the future. Can only look forward, right?
Yes.
So, okay, let's move back to the exhibition and start moving towards some artwork again. But how did you narrow down your choices for artists in this exhibition, and how did you narrow down your choices for artworks? Because there were so many amazing options that we reviewed.
Some people I knew personally, but most of those folks, because of my involvement in exhibitions in Southern California, a lot of quilt artists that live in Southern California, that was a requirement. You had to be a resident of Southern California. So that narrows the field a little bit. But most of the artists that are in this exhibition have won awards, have been juried into other exhibitions. They have a reputation for being at the top of their game in the contemporary quilt world. So it wasn't too difficult to narrow the field. And again, the internet's always helpful.
Yes, the internet is indispensable these days.
I also found too that I didn't bring anybody's work to the museum that I hadn't gone online and looked at their website. And I really advocate for artists that want to develop a reputation in this field to have an up-to-date website, because that's very often what will bring your work to the attention of curators, and I spend a lot of time doing that.
I absolutely echo your experience there. When we were reviewing possibilities for exhibitions at OMA, same. Having a website is hugely influential on how we choose and how we review artwork. All right, so let's dive deeply again into some of these beautiful works and look at some more images and detailed shots. So every single piece in this exhibition is remarkable. It wouldn't be in the exhibition if it wasn't an amazing, remarkable quilt, but just a sec. But tell me about some of the works that have some really fascinating details, especially when you look closely.
Well, most people, when you hear the word quilt, don't think of a gown. But this work, Abstract of Recollections by Marty Ornish. Marty is a dedicated repurposer artist, if there is such a title. Marty sources her materials from thrift shops. A lot of people have old quilts or pieces of quilt that they give to her. Her extensive materials are from pieces that she puts together, and then she embellishes and adds other details. I mean, you can see the beautiful hem along on this one and the way the apron on the quilt, which I hesitate to call it a quilt because it's a gown. And I'll tell a little story on Marty. She has a beautiful piece that she did. It's a cape and in a crazy quilt pattern. And that's been very well publicized, been in other shows. And I asked her where she found the fabric, and she said she got it out of the dumpster, which a girl after my own heart, because I love the idea of making something new with something old, and that's what Marty does. And just so you know, any of you out there that decide you want to do this, if you put it in the freezer for a while to freeze anything that might still be alive in that fabric that's been around for a while, good idea.
That is very true. Yes, if anyone has artwork that they'd like to have in a museum that might have living creatures in it, please do freeze that artwork first. All right, well, let's go move on to the next creation. I hesitate to call the next one a quilt.
So, well, I think of both of these works as gowns, because if they're worn by an actual model, as you see in this image by the work by Tara Ritaco, this is charged up neon jellyfish, and it doesn't really show quite as well in these slides, but this is what I like to call an electric gown. Tara has woven pieces of LED lighting throughout the work, and it plugs in and it lights up. And in a well-lit, subdued lighting area, which the museum has wonderfully placed it on a black surface mannequin. When it's lit, it truly glows in the dark. It's fabulous. And again, here's something, if somebody said, I saw this gown at the museum that lights up, and oh, by the way, it's a quilt. You would never put those two things together. And that's one of the things I like about this show and about artists like this that are doing things that are really outside the box.
Yeah, yes, that's the whole thing about this whole field, is it's so outside the box and so unexpected, which is something we really love at OMA. Okay, so now tell us about some particularly complicated artworks that you've selected, and what makes the execution really impressive on these artworks.
Well, here we go. Something, when I look at work, whether it's quilt work, quilt art, or any other kind, what intrigues me is something I've never seen before, or somebody that's using well-recognized materials in a really unusual way. And this book by Charlotte Bird called Odyssey is a fine example of that. This is 9 feet wide, or long as you would when it is on a pedestal on a platform in the exhibition. And every single page in the book is a location in Southern California. And Charlotte quilted the pages, and then the pages are mounted on acrylic panels so that the book can stand vertically, as you'll see it, in the earlier slide. And you can walk around and look at every panel. And her husband's done wonderful research of every location that's in this quilt, and there will be signage that goes along with every page. So if you're walking through and you're trying to figure out, well, where in Southern California is this? Just look down at the title card for that page, and you'll find out, a little bit about the geography of that location. This was a long in the making. Obviously, you can imagine that putting together work like this is not something that you do over a couple of weekends. Charlotte worked for months on this piece. just figuring out how to make the pages stand up and how to incorporate the number of images that she wanted to show. So there's really stark landscapes, and then there's traffic jams in downtown. So
It's all Southern California.
it's got all of Southern California in it. So another one that is a sort of a complicated work, and I say complicated partly because Linda Anderson is so precise about her work. And when you see the stitching on this, which you will in a detail in a minute, you'll see how precise the stitching is. Linda is a painter. She paints all of her quilts herself, and then they are very heavily stitched. All of the imagery is of her own design. And if you look at the detail, especially on the face on this particular piece, you'll see how close the stitches are, how small the stitches are. Also, there's a lot of changing the colors of thread so that the colors that are melding with the fabric create the shadows and the spaces in the work.
Yeah, I love the way the thread and the stitching weaves in and out on the background, and it really makes it such a dynamic background of the artwork.
Yeah, I think the detail on even the hand here, it gives you an idea of how she manipulates the color and the shapes of the stitching, to make it almost three-dimensional.
Yeah, yes, that is a thing about her quilts. I've seen a number of them. They truly look three-dimensional with how detailed the color gradations are.
Well, speaking of three-dimension, the next slide is a work by Sandra Lauterbach, and it is called Spring. And it is also three-dimensional. Sandra creates fabric collages that stand away from the wall just slightly, and she does that by putting wire behind the work. So even though we're looking at it, as a flat, it appears to be a flat piece of work, but when you're standing right in front of it, you can see through those negative spaces onto the wall where the fabric actually is standing out and sort of undulates towards you. It's got a movement to it. And it also looks like it's sort of floating on up into the sky. I love the way the movement on this work.
Yeah, I find her work to be so graphic, like graphic as in a graphic novel almost, like with those heavy dark outlines and then those rich, bright, vibrant colors. I love this piece for how lively it is. Spring is a perfect name for it.
And I want to interject here. I just love that space at Oceanside Museum of Art, where works like this are able to be on a wall by themselves because there's so much energy there and it's so dynamic that if it were in a space where there was more quilts closer to it, I don't think you would feel the motion as much. And it's a beautiful installation. I mean, the gallery is just right for the 35 artists because each one has its own space. And I really appreciate that.
Each one really can hold the space and has its room to kind of glow in its space. Yes. Okay, so we did see the two dresses that were in the exhibition earlier. And before I saw those choices, I agree. Like I wouldn't have thought about clothing and fabric as art, but they clearly are. So let's talk a little bit about why you decided to include fashion in art and those particular pieces.
Fashion and art is really kind of the same thing. I mean, think of all of the fashion designers that have to do the same thing these artists are doing in this show. They're dealing with fabric, they're dealing with stitching, they're trying to come up with a design that's balanced and has some personality, or that wants to pull you in. You want to see more of it. So Oceanside Museum of Art actually is one of those museums that has shown fashion as art. They had a show, you had a show last year, dress rehearsal.
Yes.
That was very fashion oriented, and also I think the art of the nails was, if not at the same time, overlapping.
Overlapping, that's right, yeah.
Both of those. And for those of us that live in Southern California and went to the Bowers Museum last year to see the fashions of Galpé, oh, it was breathtaking. The work of that artist, if you don't know her, look her up, Galpé, fashion designer that does huge sculptural kind of work, heavily beaded, a range of materials. So my point is that museums are really showing fashion as art, and to be able to, I just don't think you can separate the two. And
It's true. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's one of the reasons I'm glad that we have these two gowns in the show, because they belong there.
Yes, they definitely belong, and especially now that I know that a quilt is any two pieces of fabric stitched together. Wow, that dress clearly falls under that category.
Yeah.
Okay, so like Charlotte's piece, some of these works really have a beautiful narrative. Can you tell us more about the artworks that have more story than what you see in the images? What are some of the stories that really spoke to you?
Oh, well, okay. This quilt by Jillian Moss, we came, we liked, we stayed. I love her title, first of all. Jillian came to the US from Ireland, so obviously she's still here, lives in Southern California, lucky for us. And one of the things I like about this piece is that she's been able to incorporate a whole lot of iconography that we think of without. First of all, there's the California bear, the state animal. Flip-flop sandals. I mean, if you go to the beach, don't we all have a pair of those? Avocados, sunscreen, a beer. I think there's a margarita glass in this quilt. And to me, it is a self-portrait in a way of Jillian and her life in Southern California, and appreciating all of those things that we all come to enjoy in this great climate that we live in.
Yes. I think there's one more slide of this one, and that's a Celtic knot, I believe.
Yeah, Jillian is doing something a little different in the last year or two in painting on canvas. So her surface is not as flexible as you would think of that a quilt would be if it's on a fabric, and there's a variety of kinds of fabric, but this is sturdy. And there's another piece that also has a story behind it, and this is Barbara Friedman's quilt, The Visit. And you'll see the two butterflies sort of floating into the sky. And Barbara tells the story that shortly after her mother passed away, these two butterflies appeared. And it just seemed so appropriate. And I thought, what a poignant story. What a nice thing to remember and to have. And besides the beautiful work.
And I believe when I was reading the title card of this work, I think this is paper stitched to the quilt. And I might be wrong, but I want to say that it was they were drawn on paper and then stitched to the quilt.
So here's what I would encourage as soon as the museum opens, for everybody to come and read all the title cards and look at the work while you're doing it.
Yes.
It's very informative. The artists have been very generous about sharing their techniques and their materials.
Yes, and this is another artist with really a really beautiful stitching in a beautiful pattern that kind of makes up. When you get back from the artwork, it all melds together as a gray sky, and then when you get real close, you can see this very detailed line work. So I wish we could talk about every single quilt in this exhibition, but it did take us about 3 days to make these slides, so that would have been a little nuts. But are there any other interesting works that you would like to highlight that we should see?
There's a couple, and especially I want to show these few just for people that maybe aren't familiar with this genre of art. Jane LaFazio's quilt, Red, and if you know Jane, it's all things red. Jane loves everything red. Jane would wear red shoes, and she has a red car, but what I like about this, is when you get up close, and you can maybe even see it in this full image, is all of the hand stitching. This is wool roving. It's somewhat labor intensive to create the fabric, if you will, with the wool roving. There's beadwork, there's a few sequins, there's a lot of embroidery, a lot of hand stitching. There's no place that you can look on this at any time and see the same thing. And even though when you stand back from it and you see mostly red, when you get up close to it, there are layers of detail and finite bits of interest.
Just incredible, the hand stitching, the variety of stitches and textures on this is it's incredible.
Yeah.
Detailed. When you step back from it, and it's a very dynamic red, but when you get really up and close, wow.
This is one of those pieces where you really want to touch it. And that's kind of a challenge when you're visiting a quilt exhibition anywhere, is because it's fabric, and we all have fabric, we wear it every day. We want to feel it in our hands. I mean, it's one of the reasons why quilters quilt. And I know that at Oceanside Museum of Art, you've got some great docents that will wear white cotton gloves and will show you the quilt if you ask nicely.
This is true. Yes, when we open, we will certainly be doing that. And then what was the next quilt with?
Talking about quilts that are different techniques. This quilt by Dan Olfe, Color Square number 9. Dan has done a series of quilts that are all generally the same size square. I believe it's something like 55 inches, if I recall. And he designs them with Photoshop on his computer, merging all of these fabulous colors on top of each other in a geometric pattern. In this series, he's inspired by some painters whose colors and imagery have made him choose the colors that he does. And then he has his design printed on whole cloth, and then it's machine stitched. And you can see in the detail the shades, the gradation of shading in the fabric. It's really what makes this vibrate when you look at it close up. It's very exciting.
Vibrate is exactly the word I would use for this one. And you can say 55 inches, but it's hard to envision. It really feels large and it filling your field of vision when you're standing in front of it.
And then before we close on works that are really interesting and somewhat different, I want to show Libby Williamson's quilt Burn Cycles. And here's another one that has to do with fires in Southern California, or anywhere, but it's so close to us here that this time of year, what we call fire season, we really can't get away from it. This work has a lot of different materials that you would not think you would find in a quilt. And I don't know all of them off the top of my head. In fact, if you can see a little bit of her title card there on the side of the screen, a zipper, a measuring tape, upholstery fabric, a rope, a repurposed scarves, yarn. And this image doesn't really do it justice, but it's very three-dimensional. And it's heavily layered, heavily stitched, as you can see. And this is another one, when you get up close to it, you just want to touch it. Some beautiful French knots there in the detail.
Yeah, this one, when you're right on top of it, is.
And it is 102 inches high. So it fits the entry to the exhibition very well because it needs a lot of space and a tall ceiling.
Yes, and I will encourage all of our viewers to go to the webpage for this exhibition, oma-online.org/quilts. Yes, /quilts. And we have a whole slideshow of the exhibition. We don't have these detail shots on there, but you can see all the artworks and the artworks in the gallery, installed in the gallery. So once we are able to open this exhibition to the public and celebrate it, what's next for you?
Oh, well, how nice of you to ask. I actually have a proposal on my desk for another exhibition at Oceanside Museum of Art. You'll be getting that very soon.
That is so exciting. I love working with you,
It's
so I
not
can't wait
quilts.
to review it. No, I know it's not
It's
quilts, but
not quilts, but it's
wow.
another Southern California artist that deserves recognition.
Yes, I can't wait to review. And what else is going on out there in the exciting realm of fabric arts,
Well,
either virtually or in person?
this huge community, this huge worldwide community, there is a juried exhibition somewhere all the time. And you can go online and find them anywhere. Just today, I was on Facebook because I go on Facebook to see what all the quilters are doing. And I saw several of the artists that are here in Southern California that have just been juried into a show on the eastern part of the country. And there's another show that was just, I think, opened last week. Um, oh, and it's escaping me right now. I think it is at the Carnegie Art Center, Carnegie Center for Art and History, if I believe that's the. And
Kansas, I want to say in Kansas,
I'm
right?
thinking maybe Indiana. Anyway,
Indiana, yeah, it might be Indiana.
I'll have to look it up. And anyway, there's 3 artists in this show that are in that show. So it's like that every day. People that are doing excellent work get into wonderful shows.
Yes, and we are so lucky and fortunate to have these world-class quilts and fabric artists here in Southern California, and we get to feature them in our beautiful museum. Thanks to you, Beth. Thank you for bringing these artists to us.
I'm so thrilled to be able to do it. I really enjoy this.
So we have a few questions from viewers. Hopefully, if we can get through them all. So I'll go with the first one. I've got my Q&A box here. Would it be possible in the future to see the back of the quilts if they're interesting? And yes, we did address that the docents will be trained. And, you know, if it's going to be a while before we open, who knows how long it will be, perhaps we can even work on some ways to get photos of some of the backs of the quilts. Because, yeah, you turn those over and it's a whole nother artwork behind there, isn't it?
It's true.
Yes. Is there an exhibition catalog available for purchase? I'll do you one better. We have a brochure, a beautiful a trifold brochure. I do believe we are planning hopefully to get it printed. We really want to be able to get this one printed, but it is going to be available for download. And as soon as we get that PDF ready, it should be ready early, maybe early next week. I'd be happy to send that out to all of the attendees on this because I think this was an anonymous question. I want to make sure whoever asked for this gets that trifold, and it'll also be available through the website. And when it's printed, it'll be available for free at the museum when we're open. But unfortunately,
I want to mention too that this program is being recorded. There are some people outside of the country that wanted to know if they'd be able to see it without having to stay up till 3 a.m. And so, yeah, if you know somebody that's out of the country, just let them know that probably next week you'll be able to find it on Oceanside Museum of Art website.
Yes, I did put the oma-online.org/quilts website in the chat just a few minutes ago, and the recording will also be on linked on that webpage. Someone asked, how long do we need to freeze the quilts for in order to kill the critters? I'm not entirely sure. Definitely Google some art conservation. It might depend on the critter. Some critters might not die in the freezer, but I do know ants die, and spiders. So it's a good start. Like overnight. Let's start with overnight. This is a good question. So for particularly Jillian Moss's quilt, does the artist paint the picture first and then sew it together, or does she sew it together and then paint? Does she put the fabric? What is the order of that?
Really good question. And we're going to be asking Jillian that very question next month on September 24th when we talk about techniques. So I don't know the answer to that myself, but you might go to Jillian's website and maybe she'll mention it there.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's going to be another wonderful program to learn more in detail from a few of the artists. Marty, the artist of the dress, the large
Gown.
gown, yes, chimed in on the chat and she said 2 weeks of freezing. 2 weeks.
Oh my.
That sounds like a good rule of thumb.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Marty. Beth, do you have a favorite quilt? Can you say if you have a favorite
I'm
quilt?
not going to do that. No, I mean, I was really privileged to be able to invite artists whose work I'm familiar with or whose work I admire from afar. If I haven't seen it in person, I've seen it online or in a catalog. And I would love to own any one of these because they're all really special. So
Yeah, same.
Couldn't pull one out.
Yes. How long will this exhibition be up? Of course, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. Currently, this is planned to be at the museum through February 21st of 2021. It has been rescheduled and extended a couple of times due to our COVID closure, but we are feeling really hopeful and confident that being open through February 21st will give our visitors time to come to the museum and enjoy this exhibition. Now, Beth, can you tell us just a little bit about that artwork that you're sitting in front of?
Oh, this is one of my favorites. In 2002, I was fortunate to curate an exhibition at Oceanside Museum of Art. It was a one-person show by the work of John Garrett. And you can Google John Garrett, last name spelled with 2 R's and 2 T's. He is a multimedia artist, started out as a weaver. You'll see a little bit of that in this particular work that is called Cha-Cha's Friday Night Out. And it was in the exhibition at Oceanside Museum of Art, purchased by a board member and then gifted to the museum and then gifted to me when I left to go to Oceanside Museum.
And then we have just a couple of more questions, and that's good because we just have a couple more minutes. About 15 years ago, we held a quilt exhibition honoring a woman who created her quilts based on her life in a concentration camp. Do you recall that exhibition? That was before my time, and I'm not familiar.
I do, and I regret that her name does not come to mind. But I bet you have a catalog there.
I bet we do have a catalog there. And if the person who asked that question wants to follow up with me via email, my email address is Katie, Katie, @oma-online.org, the same as our website. I can look more into that and I can see if I have a catalog and I can tell you a little bit more about it. But you did ask, are we going to be bringing that exhibition back? At this point, we don't have any plans to bring that exhibition back, but I'm really glad you brought it up because although I know a lot about our exhibition history, I wasn't familiar with that one, and I'm looking forward to doing more research on that one.
And I feel badly that I don't remember the artist's name, but as with so many exhibitions, I can picture it, and I know exactly where certain works were on the wall when they were installed. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing how exhibitions can make that kind of an impression on your brain that it's like
in your head.
They really stick. Just one more question. Would you consider some of these pieces a collage? I think this was particularly asked about the tide pools piece, but that could apply to any of or many of these pieces.
Well, certainly there are several works in this exhibition that you could consider a collage just because of the way the fabric and the other materials are layered on top of each other. Not necessarily pieced edge to edge the way a traditional quilt technique would be stitched with one piece of fabric up against another, but these are more bits and pieces in some places, either fused or even occasionally glued onto the surface. So certainly you could call that a collage.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Patricia mentioned in the chat, was the artist Faith Ringgold the artist who?
No, she wasn't. Faith is a Harlem-based contemporary quilter that tells stories about her culture. And but no, that's not the one that was being referred to from the concentration camp era.
Well, we're going to do more research into that one.
Yeah.
but the chat and the Q&A are just flooded with thank you, thank you, thank you. This is amazing, and I can't echo that sentiment enough. This has been really a wonderful chat to have with you, Beth. The artwork is brilliant, and we're so grateful that you've been able to bring together this group of artists and these beautiful pieces, and we're really happy we're able to share them with our audience, and hopefully soon in person.
Yes, and I am thrilled that the show is being extended. This hopefully will give everybody that can come and see it an opportunity to do so.
Exactly.
Well, thank you both for an amazing talk. We're still seeing the chat, flooded with compliments. The detailed shots were exquisite to look at, and I'm hoping that
Thank you, Katie.
that whet the appetite of everyone at home, and that they're excited to come to the museum, especially with that extension into February. So we certainly hope to see everyone there, and what a treat to be able to see some of that work up close and in person. So again, Katie and Beth, thank you so much for a wonderful evening. It was really great to hear about the exhibition. Before everyone leaves, I see people leaving. Stay on your computer for just 2 more minutes, because if you like this, we have a lot coming up in September. So let me share that with you in just a moment. I have to share my screen. Hopefully everyone is still here. I know you are. Great. So first thing to share next up, we hope you shop at OMA. So we are temporarily closed for the moment, but we're happy to let you know that we do have a pop-up museum store happening now in the museum lobby and the front terrace. Socially distanced, of course, so it's completely safe. The store is open Thursdays through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. So please, if you're in the area, swing on by the museum. There are wonderful artworks. We have artwork from local artists, books, collectibles, and all the proceeds go to the museum as well as the local artists. So you can feel great about your purchase. So we certainly hope to see you there. Also, next up, excited to let you know about this. We will be offering the wonderful workshop Taste of Art. It's a fan favorite, led by Robin Douglas, but that will actually be at the museum. So we'll be making artwork on the front terrace of the museum. Limited space available, so only a few tables that are available for that workshop. So please, if you are interested, jump on that soon. I've heard from a lot of you at home that you love the virtual experience, you feel connected to us during this time, but what's better than being at the museum, being together, and making art together. So please, we hope to see you there soon on Thursday, September 17th. That's coming up soon. Also, Beth mentioned that another program tied to Southern California Contemporary Quilts is a small talk. It's a popular series that we've had that is led by a host in a roundtable of artists. This one coming up on Thursday, September 24th, SoCal Quilters Roundup, is going to be great. It's going to be another deep dive into the exhibition led by Beth herself, with a roundtable of several of the artists featured in the exhibition. And as Beth mentioned, they'll be talking about technique and their processes, also talking shop about the materials that they're using, and then also kind of looking at the field in a macro view, sort of what's happening in the field of contemporary quilts. So you do not want to miss this really exciting insider conversation happening on Thursday, September 24th, and that's a virtual program that's happening on Zoom. Also, we're excited to let you know that our popular virtual art making series, Art Apart Workshops, is coming back. We have, it's going to come back in September, California Watercolors. It's actually going to be a virtual plein air workshop, 3-day workshop. You do not want to miss this. And this is going to tie into another exhibition, Gifted, that's happening at the museum that features so many wonderful California landscapes. So that's happening on Tuesday, September 22nd until October 6th. And I mentioned that's a 3-day workshop course, and you do not want to miss that as well. So I know that was a mouthful, but We have a lot coming up, and we really want you to be there. So if you are local and a friend of the museum, we hope that you'll continue to connect with us virtually, but also swing by and support our store. Also, join us for sort of in-person art making through Taste of Art. If you even if you aren't local, you can still stay connected to us through our virtual programming. And for everyone, now is a wonderful time to continue to support the museum. We're very close to reopening, so we certainly hope that you'll take advantage of becoming a member of the museum and also supporting the museum, and any little bit helps. So I'll be following up with everyone who attended the workshop, the talk tonight. I'll be sending you all that information by email, so I know you're writing that down on your notepad very, very fast, but don't worry, I will write it for you, and you will have all that information. There have been a lot of questions about how to rewatch this talk or to share it with a friend. And as Katie mentioned, I will be sending a YouTube link of tonight's recording as well, so you can spread that throughout your networks, and we certainly hope that you will. So thank you for everyone for joining. Thank you for staying on, hearing about the wonderful September that is planned at the museum. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Beth. It's been a wonderful. Thank you all at home. Have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.